Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. It's another boxy bag day today. This one's a little bit different though. We're going to put some pockets inside. One of our viewers who goes by the name Chicky posted a photo and a link to a video on our Christine's Home Affairs Facebook group the other day, and it had pockets on the inside. I really liked the bag, and the box corners on the inside of the bag were a little bit weird, so I thought I could actually incorporate pockets into the box corners without having funny box corners. That's what we're doing today. So this is the bag. Let me just fold the edges over so you can see it better. On the inside of the bag, we have a bunch of pockets. So we have them going down the length of the bag on both sides, and we also have a pocket going across the short edge of the bag as well. That's what we're doing today. Now, I will be honest and tell you it's not for the faint-hearted. So if you've never made a boxy bag before, I don't recommend this to be your first one that you try to make. You can go and watch any one of my other boxy bag videos and it will be a lot easier to follow. Get used to that first and then come back to this one and try out the pockets in the corners and along the sides. Different technique. I've never done it before. In fact, this is the first time I've ever done this, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's turned out. Let's get to the video. Okay, let's get this out of the way first. For my adjustable strap, I'm going to be using a webbing. I'm using a number 5 continuous zip, and I'm going to be attaching 2 sliders to this as well. If you want to use a regular zip, then just make it a little bit longer than the measurements I'm about to give you. I've got 2 swivel clips, 2 D-rings and an adjustable slider. You want these to be the same width as the product that you're going to be using for your handles and tabs. The stabilizer I'm using today for the outer fabric is a fusible fleece called Parlan. It's very much like a lightweight Pallan, so you can use whatever product you like. It depends on how much stability you actually want in your bag, but I'm happy with this one. So I've got 2 pieces of fabric for the outside of the bag. This is a furnishing fabric. The weight of it is very much like a lightweight denim. So 2 of those. I've got 2 pieces for the lining. I've also got 2 other pieces that are for the long pockets on the inside. 2 of the blue there, and then I've got 1 piece of interfacing for each of those. And for the small side pockets, I've got another 2 pieces of fabric plus interfacing for those as well. So all of your measurements will be up on the screen now. And now we can get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is stabilize all my fabric. I've already done my outer fabric. If you want to have a label on your product, then the position of my label is at 4.5 inches from the top. Now I'm using a directional fabric, so when I put this together, I do need to make sure that I have my flowers going in the right direction. And then I just want to pick which is the best side to have my label on. Probably this one. So take your smaller pieces. I've got 7 inches this way and 6.5 inches that way. I want to fold my fabric in half and then place my interfacing just on 1/2, so I'm lining it up along the fold. It's quite a bit smaller than the fabric itself. That's because I want to make sure I leave enough room for the seam allowance on the side, because this will be sewn into the boxed corners. Fold the fabric in half, fuse that, do the same with this one. Double check that you've got the 7-inch length folded in half, and then grab these ones here and line up the interfacing along the fold at the centre. Fold that over. You can iron that as well, and likewise for this one. So let's go and fuse all of those and then we can get sewing. All right, everything's been stabilised that needs to be. Now that we have our interfacing to one half of our fabric, you just want to double check that these long pieces and the short pieces are the same height. Then what we can do is open that out, bring the right sides together. So if this were a printed fabric, I would have the printed sides facing, and all I'm going to do is sew along the bottom edge to close that up. You don't need to do anything with the short sides. Turn it the right way out, and then we'll go and top stitch along the folded edge. And we'll do the same with all 4 pieces. So you just want to fold this in half. Sew all the way down the long edge for all 4 of them. I'm using a regular universal number 90 or size 14 machine needle. My seam allowance for these pieces is just going to be 1/4 inch. So I don't have to sew right along the edge of the stabiliser. I'm just sewing along the edge of the fabric at 1/4 inch. And I'll repeat that for all of these pieces. With all those done, turn the tube the right way out, press your fabric. I've got the seam line along the bottom here. I'm going to stitch along the other side. And repeat for the others. All right, those 4 pieces are finished. We're going to set these 2 short ones aside because we'll put those in when we're boxing the corners later. Grab your lining fabric, fold your fabric in half, and with the right side facing up, mark a line in the centre of your fabric here. So I'm going to say this is the top of my fabric. I'm going to measure 3.5 inches from the top edge right across, and we'll do that on both pieces. And once we've marked this line here, we're going to mark 2 lines on either side of the centre. From this centre line, we will measure out 2 inches or 5 centimetres. And from the centre to the left, we'll be doing the same. And we'll repeat that for the other piece. Then we can grab our pocket pieces, the long ones. I've got the top stitching along the top edge here. Fold this in half to find the centre, and I'll just line this one up beside it. From the centre, on the 2 blue pocket pieces, we're going to measure 2 3/4 inches or 7 centimetres. We'll set one aside. So we don't need our centre markings anymore. All we need are the 2-inch marks and the 2 3/4 inch marks, and we're going to line those up. Line up the top edge of your pocket piece with that line we've marked across here. Pop a pin in place, and then this mark here will line up with that other 2-inch line. And the rest of this pocket we're going to leave loose. I will pin it in place for now. We're going to sew from the top straight down to the bottom. We'll back stitch at the top and bottom, and that will create a little pocket here. These pockets will be created later. This is the area that we're going to be cutting out for our box corners. you could go and position this in place now if you want to. I've already been there, done that, and when I cut out my box corners, I forgot to be careful and accidentally cut out my fabric that had been stitched down. So I actually recommend not stitching the flaps down at this stage. We're just going to pin it, and then that way we can make sure everything's going to line up properly later and we don't accidentally cut bits off. So set that one aside, grab the other one, we'll line up those outer markings with the outer markings here, and once again line that up nice and straight along that line we've marked. Let's take this to the machine and sew both of those channels. And we'll repeat for the next one. Now I've marked this using yellow chalk. That was only so that you could actually see the lines that I was marking, because this fabric is so busy and it's difficult to see the markings. But I do not recommend using yellow, pink or blue chalk on fabric. It's very difficult to get out. But again, that was only just to show you where the markings were. We've got a little pocket here. I'm not going to be closing the bottom section of my pocket because I want things to be able to sit in and reach the bottom of the bag. What I will do at the moment though is just fold this flap over, and I'll fold this one over as well, and I'll just keep those in the middle for the time being. I want them out of the way of any cutting and folding and sewing and things like that, so it'll just be more comfortable if I keep this out of the way, and then we can go on with the next steps. Let's start with the outer fabric, and we're going to put our zip in. I've already put a label on. I've used one of my nicer faux leather labels, and I've got a continuous zip here, and I've got some double-sided tape. If you don't have double-sided tape, then just use pins or clips to position your zip in place. Peel the paper off. I'm just going to use 1/2 of the zip for now, and I'm going to place the zipper teeth faced down and the edge of the tape faced along the top edge, and I'm going to line that up right along the top edge, securing it in place with that double-sided tape. Grab one of our lining pieces, and with the top stitched edge facing the top, we'll flip that over. I'll line up the side edges and then bring up the lining to the top and press that in place. When I go to the machine, I'll be sewing with the stabilised fabric faced up, and I'll sew along here. Grab this one and double check your orientation again. You want the top section here, and we'll do exactly the same thing we did on the other side. Grab the other side of your zipper tape, and with the teeth down and the top edge of your tape along the top, you can press that in place. If you haven't got access to these, or you don't know how to use continuous zips, I'll post a link to a video I did showing you how to put in a regular zip. I'll flip this fabric over and we'll line that up again. Let's sew it up. If you've got a zipper foot or a really narrow foot, you want to have that on at this stage. I run the edge of my foot right up against the edge of the zipper teeth here, so I can feel the ridge that it makes, and I just let that run along beside it. We'll do the next one. Separate the lining from the zip. We want the lining sitting behind the outer fabric, and top stitch. I'm going to increase my stitch length to about 3.5. Prior to that it was on 2.8. And I'll do the same for the other piece. And I'll reduce my stitch length back to 2.8. Okay, so what we have now is the zip installed. We need to put our zipper pulls on. So bring the fabric together with the right side facing up or down. Some people prefer to put their zipper pulls on with the teeth faced down. So it's personal choice. This is just the way I've always done it. So I'm lining up the edge of my fabric here to sit nice and straight. And I want my zipper tape to be straight as well. It's actually almost perfectly straight. I'm not even going to trim it back. If it wasn't right, I would trim some off. Grab your sliders. I've got the curved edge facing me. Place that over one side and then over the other. Push the slider on, and my fabric is a little bit distorted there. I'm not happy with that, so I'll try that again. By cutting the zipper tape straight across the top, I can see at a glance that they should line up. Sometimes they don't. That's better. So that's nice and straight across there. And we'll bring the slider up almost to the other end. Fabric's pretty much lined up. Nothing I can do about it now. I'm going to trim this zipper tape back so that the teeth line up again. And I'll place this head on this side. And that's lined up nicely for me this time. Bring the heads together, and if everything looks right, then you can move the sliders to the centre. I'm just going to leave this open about that much for now. Now we're going to bring our right sides together, separate the lining. Next thing we're going to do with our right sides together, we're going to sew along this long edge here. On this side we'll sew the entire length. For the lining, we're just going to sew from the outside edge a third of the way in, and from the other outside edge we'll sew in about a third of the way in again. So I'm going to leave quite a large opening here, and that will enable me to be able to bring everything through more easily later. So we'll sew from here to here and here to here, backstitch at each end and all the way across here. From here I'm going to have 1 centimetre seam allowance or 3/8 of an inch. And I'll do the same for the lining, making sure I leave an opening in the middle. Alright, the bottom of our bag has been closed up. Set that aside for just a minute. Grab what you're using for your handles or shoulder straps, and I'm going to cut off 6 inches or about 15 centimetres and cut that in half. And that will leave me with 2 pieces. Grab your D-rings. These are optional. If you don't want to have shoulder straps, then don't put D-rings. Tabs are handy because it gives you something to hold on to when you're opening the bag. So pop the D-rings onto your webbing. Now we need to take the outer fabric. I'm going to press my seam open, and I'm going to line up the centre of my seam with the centre of my zip here. Before I do that, I'm going to place one of these tabs onto the end of the fabric. If you need to, you can go and sew this in place before you sew the side seam. But I think if you've been making these bags long enough, you can just leave that sitting there. have your lining out of the way for the moment. So with that seam pressed open, you'll line it up along the centre of your zip and clip the outer layers together. So at the moment you've got the tab sitting in the middle there, lining at the back, and this is nicely lined up along here. Flip it over and grab your lining. The bottom seam that we have here, we're going to line that up with the centre of the zip. It's going to be a bit awkward because you've got all that fabric underneath. You can press your seams open or just to one side, it doesn't really make much difference. And we'll clip all of these layers together. So on this side you've got the lining and the outer fabric clipped together, and on the outer side only is where you've got your little tab. Go around to the other side. Once again, you want to press your seam open, and it's a good idea to go and press this whole thing so that the fabric sits properly. That seam along the centre will line up with the centre of your zip, so hold that in place, and then just put your tab to the inside, fold that back over, flip it over, before we sew up the side seams, it's really important to just double check that you've left your zip open at this point. We're going to go back to the machine now, and we're sewing all the way down this edge here. Because I'm just using a regular Gutermann sewing thread and I'm using upholstery fabric here, I will actually stitch that twice. What I will also do is on the folded edge here, I'll mark the 2-inch mark for my box corners. I've done this because I want to start sewing here with my 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I want to do a back stitch right here where this mark is. Sew all the way down to here with that same seam allowance, and I'll extend beyond that and back stitch a few times there. When we cut this fabric out later, if we've got enough back stitching happening here, then you can do your box corners without the thread unravelling. Rather than sewing all the way from one end to the other and then have your fabric come apart, it's easier to know whereabouts you're doing your box corners. With a 1 centimetre seam allowance, I'll start behind that and finish beyond that. I now have all of my layers of fabric placed neatly together, and they have lined up on the outside folds as well, so they're nice and even, and I've got that tab on the inside. When I get to the middle here, I want to make sure that that D-ring is sitting down here, not up the top here, but I will have a look before I get to it. So 1 centimetre. So I've back stitched a few times where my box corner is going to be cut. I'll just have a peek underneath here to make sure my D-ring is out of the way. Everything's lined up nicely here. If you're using a regular sewing machine, you want to go slow because we're going over lots of layers. I'm just using a regular universal sewing machine needle, and I'm going slow. I'll back stitch because I want to secure these layers really well. And I'll sew beyond that other mark I've made. And I can do the other side. Okay, with those side seams finished, we can start marking our box corners. And I think we can trim off any excess zipper tape as well. And we can also open our zip all the way. This will make it easier for us to bring our box corners together shortly. Now we want to make sure that our pocket pieces here are still folded together because we're about to do the box corners, and this is where I made my mistake earlier. So lay your fabric out nice and flat. From this stitching line here, we can extend that stitching line if you need to, just as to use as a guide. We're going to measure 2 inches or 5 centimetres from the stitching line and also from the folded edge. So if you have a square ruler or a 2-inch template, you can line that up along that stitching line and the fold and mark a square. We can do that on all 4 corners now, as long as you remember to take that 2-inch measurement from that imaginary stitching line. Otherwise your box corners won't line up. What I'm going to do, just to help keep the fabric nice and flat, I'm going to place a couple of clips just down beside the box corner here, because we've got the bulk of that pocket sitting in underneath. It'll help us cut out a neater box. So you can cut that out on your marked line. Now we're ready to lay out the pockets on the inside and box our corners. So this might get a little bit confusing here, but what you can do is go back into your lining, undo those pins on the pocket, and then what you can do is take this pocket piece and open it out all the way. You'll see it sticking out on your box corners, so you can have it pulled all the way across. Just for now, we don't want to secure it with these ends sticking out like this. We're going to tuck them in shortly so that we can have those little folds inside the pocket. Grab the other one as well, just open it all out. And what you're going to have now is the fabric sitting outside the box corner. The pocket fabric will be a little bit smaller than that one side of your box corner shape. Keeping it nice and flat across here, have the top and the bottom evenly distributed from one corner to the next, and then we're going to slide this back inside and just clip it together. And if we have a look inside here, that's the original pocket that we've done, and then across here we've got the next one, and we're going to have a nice little rounded shape inside there. So the long pocket lined up on the edge of the box corner. On the other end you'll do the same. So this being stitched in place along here will actually help you to keep it nice and straight along the top. We can just push that pocket back inside to line up with the edge of your fabric. And that's one side of the bag done. Now we can do the other. So I think this is probably the most confusing part about the whole bag. Have your pocket fabric flat and then push it underneath the lining. So that's your long pockets ready. Now I bet you've forgotten about these short ones. It's time to get those in now as well. Once again, we've got the top stitching along one edge. We're going to have that sitting to the top of our bag. And if it doesn't happen that way, it's not the end of the world. I've got the seam along the bottom here, which means that's the bottom of the inside of the bag. And if you have a look inside, you can see the zipper here. So what I want with this top stitched edge is I want that to face the table. because that's where my zipper tape is. I'm now going to take this, before I feed it through, I'm just going to press a crease and I'm going to line up that fold with the seam that I've got along here. So we'll take the top stitched edge faced down onto the table with the lining faced up, feed that through that hole, and then where I folded the fabric here, I'm going to line that up with my seam line. I feel like this is going to be really confusing, but if we go slow, hold our tongues the right way, I'm sure we'll be fine. So I'm lining this up just on my lining fabric, not on the outer fabric, just for now. So that pocket piece there is on the opposite side of the box corner, and that top half of that pocket can just be clipped together as well. And the center here can line up on the edge again. Secure it to the lining. Just get your fingers in there and line up the rest of it on the lining. So this is what you have so far. The long pocket is on the long side of the fabric, and the short pocket is along the seam here. When you put these layers together, the pockets will line up. So we can now line this up from the boxed corner, place those layers together. You can see here that my blue pocket pieces are not quite lined up yet, so it's going to be more important for me to line up the box corners, and then I can manipulate one of the pocket pieces so that they line up with each other. I'll slide that one down a bit, clip it together, and I'll slide the other one down a bit. So those are lined up. Then I'm going to open out the outer fabric and pinch those corners out. Once you've pinched the corners out, line them up with the lining. Put all of those layers together. And this is now ready to be sewn across. When I'm batch sewing or making lots of bags, I would go and do all of my corners together now and then take them to the machine and stitch it. But I feel like this is going to be a fiddly one and a difficult one to try and explain. So we're going to go and take this to the machine now and sew straight across here. Because there's so many layers, I'm going to double stitch that. I'm still using my 1 centimetre seam allowance here too. All right, 1 corner done, 3 more to go. Let's find the other side. And once again, we're going to pinch the corners out, line those up first. And then you can reposition your pocket piece so that it lines up with the other one. So we've got the pocket layers underneath here. Just manipulate this fabric. And if you've remembered to open your zip all the way, this will be much easier to maneuver. If you haven't got the zip open all the way, you're going to find it difficult to bring these corners together. Pinch out the outer fabric as well. and secure all those layers together. And we'll sew that one in place. We're halfway there with those box corners. Let's be daredevils and do both of these corner ones together. Grab the other pocket. Once again, this top stitching needs to face the table. The lining we're going to have faced up, and I've got the open sections across here. We've already got the long pockets in place. Keep the stitching line faced down and then slide that in across here. Slide that in, and I think this time I'm just going to hold it in place in the centre, since it has to be realigned anyway. And this pocket's going to be longer than the width of the fabric that you've got across the box corner as well, because we want another bulge on the inside. That's in place on the side. Let's go back to the corners and we'll pinch this corner out. The fabric is lining up this time. Don't know why the other one didn't. Clip that together. Pinch the other corner out. And we can line up those layers as well. So that side's done. Let's get the outer fabric. You've just got to sort of scrunch it up and get it around. Makes it doubly difficult because we've got so many folds on the inside. Pinch this edge out. And the other one. That's one, and come around to this side and we'll pinch the last corner together. Once again, for some reason this pocket wants to line up. And for the last time we can pinch this corner out. Alright, we'll sew this one and this one, and then all our corners are done. The box corners are all finished. Now we get to see how this has worked out. I haven't seen it yet. As I said, the other one I made was all wrong, so I ended up making it without the pockets at all. And I haven't seen this with the new pockets. So we'll turn this the right way out. Let's keep the suspense going. Oh look, you can see the pockets here. How cool is that? Before we turn this the right way out, I'm going to bring those edges together, fold the raw edges of the lining in underneath, and I'll top stitch that. I'll quickly go and do that now. Actually, you guys can come with me. All right, that box corner's finished. Let's turn it the right way out and have a look. The last thing we have to do is make the shoulder strap, but that'll only take a few minutes. Poke out all your corners. All right, let's check this out. If you flip this open, so there we go, all our little pocket dividers in there. I don't really have anything that we can put in here. So you've got room to fit all sorts of things in here. Pin cushion, maybe a couple of weights. whatever your heart desires. But this would be great for cosmetics, paints, artist supplies, things like that. You could even make more channels in here if you wanted to, but I still wouldn't go right to the very end when I stitched it down. So if you like, you could halve the distance, make another channel in there, halve the distance in here as well, and then you could put some makeup brushes in there, or even different types of makeup or nail polishes. So you could go and put as many channels in there as you liked. Now let's go and do that shoulder strap. Before we set our bag aside, when I make a lot of these bags, and because you can't really go and iron the corners properly or very well, what I'll usually do is I'll just roll the corners and I'll pop a clip in place on all four sides. And I'll do this just for about half an hour or so. It kind of presses those layers together and helps the box corner sit more nicely later on, because I don't often have the time to go and get a tailor's ham and try and iron out my corners properly. I find this is much easier. So by the time we finished our handle and put that on, that'll be pressed nicely and it'll just sit nicer afterward. Set this aside. I've got 2 swivel clips and an adjustable slider and the remainder of my webbing. Grab one end of your webbing, your adjustable slider, feed that through and over the slider. Fold this end over once by about an inch or so. Move that slide across. So I've just got one fold, and then I'll fold that over again, and from this folded edge to the other side, it's about 1.5 inches or 4 centimetres. It's only that length because we want to be able to sew a box around here without accidentally stitching over the slider. So it just gives you a good amount of room to be able to get in there and sew that together. All I'm going to do now is sew a box around this. I'll go back and forward a few times and that will secure it. I'll go and do that now and I'll be right back. All right, that's closed up on the end there. Find the other end, put one of your swivel clips on, and we've got the swivel side to the side that doesn't have the fold, keeping the rest of your webbing nice and flat. We're going to feed that back through the adjustable slider from the side that has the fold, and then we'll go through the other side and come back to the other end, keeping it nice and flat again. Pop your next clasp on, fold your webbing over and then over one more time, just like we did on the other side. Hold that in place. Now we want to double check that everything is the right way around. So we've got this folded edge here to the inside, and we've got this section here on the inside of our handle as well. I'll go and sew that in place as well now. That's all finished. I've removed the clips from the bag, and you can see that this sits a little bit better now. Pop your strap over the D-rings. Let's open out these pockets again. And there we have a great little carry bag where you can hide a multitude of bits and pieces. I've just noticed blue on blue. You can't really see the bag, can you? What did you think of this one? The pockets were a little bit complicated trying to get them in the corners, but at the end of it, it was quite easy. I think it's just something that you've got to get your head around. We're also used to doing certain box corners and not having anything else in the way. But I really like that I've been able to make this bag without having any bindings on there at all. I don't know what it is about bindings. I just don't like them. If ever I see a pattern that does have bindings in there, I'm instantly trying to figure out how to make the bag fully lined without any of those bindings. I think for me it's just that I don't do them very well, or I don't think I do them very well, and my double folds don't necessarily meet up very well underneath. So for me, it's actually much easier to work out how to fully line something than it is to bind something. I'll be putting these in the shop. In fact, I've already got one in the shop at the moment, and I had a lady, she wanted to purchase it, but for some reason she was going home to check the measurements, but she reckons she's going to buy that on my website. I've got a $45 price tag on these. I'm not going to make any more with this pocket on the inside. For me, it's too time consuming. I don't necessarily think that everybody will want a pocket on the inside. For future bags with this fabric, because I've got lots of this gorgeous fabric, in future I will just put a normal pocket on the inside and sell them at $45 each. I did try this out just with the pockets on the short side. So if you have a look in here, there's a little pocket just on the short edge and another one over here. They're not really true pockets. It's just a little slip area where you can pop something in to keep it in place, stop it from rattling around. Oh, and this one here, I did actually end up putting a handle on the side just in case you wanted to be able to carry this around just with a handle on the side rather than the full crossbody strap. With all of these ones, I'm just going to make them $45 in the shop because I won't be doing them again unless they're just simple box bags. Anyway, I hope this wasn't too complicated for you. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.